new thoughts about this issue. So, Michael, as we were talking before, many of us have been studying in different ways policy change, policy dismantling. This agenda became even more important after Bolsonaro's government, and you know a little bit of what happened with our government during the last few years. But we studied before Bolsonaro's government already policy dismantling, because this is not an issue that you proposed based on democratic backsliding. It's something different. So I would like maybe to start asking you, what's the difference, and how did you come to the concept of policy dismantling and not policy change? What's the difference between policy change and policy dismantling? Because this is something that has been struggling us, and then we can go after more about democratic backsliding and the relationship with policy dismantling. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a really great pleasure to be here and to have a conversation on this issue that is somehow close to my heart. But it's also true that in the last years I was not working on policy dismantling, and that was the reason why I said, well, I'm happy to, if you have questions, or to engage in a conversation with you, but I mean, I cannot present you a paper because all what I, knew about it, or what I thought I know about it, I already kind of, it's out. So it's a bit of, it went a bit on the back burner of my work. At the same time, I'd say I was very touched and of course a bit proud also to see that here in Brazil is such a huge community that looks into into policy dismantling again from a different angle, from a different context. And I should also say that I was surprised to find this then in the combination with backsliding, but we speak about this later. Mm-hmm. So the question was, what is the difference between dismantling and policy change? And if you want to have my, maybe you will be disappointed, but I'd say, if you want my recommendation, there is conceptually, I mean, it is a form of policy change. So it's just a sub form of change. You cannot, I mean, if you ask me now, would I think, I mean, dismantling was a nice context, and we can speak about it when it makes sense to say policy dismantling. But if you ask conceptually and empirically, I would say, well, it is not different. It's even dangerous to think it in a different category than policy change. You can say transformation or whatever, but I would not like to be in a corner where I had to defend conceptually a huge difference, a kind of a categorical difference between policy dismantling and policy change. I'm very sorry if this disappoints you, because I understood from what Gabi told me that there's some, questions around this, but it's, we can also be honest. Sometimes we speak about when it emerged and when that was a different context, and maybe this then explains a bit why we went for this term. But I think conceptually I could not advocate any researcher or young researcher. I see a lot of young researcher here to go, enthusiastic. I mean, to be military about dismantling as something completely different in policy change.
No, this is not disappointing at all, because we are discussing. Sorry. Wow. Wow, it's now we can close and have a beer, just in a few moments for those who are here. So no, we actually, Eduardo and myself, we have discussing this a lot, and you have written this, that policy dismantling is undoubtedly a subcategory of policy change. So yes. You are totally coherent. No, you are totally coherent. But we would like for you to elaborate further on the methodology, because you have done a lot of comparison in your work, and sometimes you are comparing types of policies, but you are also interested in multi-level comparisons and how blame avoidance games can be multi-level. So could you please talk a little bit about the research design you have been using to approach these issues?
I realize more and more the older I get, or the longer it is that I have tenure, the more theoretical I get and the less empirical. I think this is something. This is something that many colleagues have such a cycle. They're very empirical and they battle a lot in the beginning, and if they have tenure and so, then they go to be more theoretical, more philosophical, and less relevant probably. Yeah, but okay. I say this because I think we should then we should have Jarle Tosun here, because she was maybe not so present in this project, but she was doing the methodological kind of the empirical part. And you stop me if I don't answer the right question. But going to the question of how did we do it, how methodologically, that was maybe the greatest challenge in that project. You may know that this was a project with 5-6 partners, right? Funded by, today it would be Horizon, but it was called differently, a European program. So there was about 3 years, over 3 years, let's say 6-7 partners, and we looked into environmental and social policy, right? So the challenge was to define or to find categories on which we could compare within the social policy field and in the environmental field. So now I have to look to you whether this is right, because I since I had a nice day today, I didn't prepare a lot. Yeah? So I didn't went back to this, but I think that was this. So it was social policy and environmental policy. So, and then of course was once you go lower and in your level of abstraction and you become more empirical. So you have this wonderful concept of policy dismantling, and then you have to go lower, right? And with each decision to go lower the ladder, there is a lot you can challenge. I think this is in all research like this. The more empirical you get, the less, of course, the smaller, the more nitty-gritty things become, and the decisions how you decide to measure can be challenged. So I actually don't remember clearly how we did it, but it was like we had to find directions of change. That was our problem. And not categorical change, but directions of change. And therefore, it was the movement more that we were as interested as let's say, the category. Because we said, what is dismantling? In the sense we interpreted it, and that can be also challenged theoretically. But of course, at that time, we interpreted it as something must shrink in some way. Yeah. So in order to get to these movements, we had to go really to the nitty-gritty of regulation, and then look, for example, I remember a discussion about certain standards, right? You do a regulation, and then you keep it for later, how precisely the thresholds. Think on environmental protection. Yeah, we want to protect the Amazon. The Amazon, I don't know anything about. Should be clear. We want to measure how do you say? The smoke that comes from a chimney in a factory, because this is pollution, and we want to measure how we want to give them, we want to regulate these emissions, emission standards. But this changes technically every year, and so you leave this for later. And so we had to go to this nitty-gritty of how precisely this changed over time. So sometimes the regulation remains even, don't need a parliamentary kind of majority to change this, but you have the adaptation, the up-to-date, bringing these things up to date on an administrative level that then goes with the help of a directive into the in this nitty-gritty that we had to go in order to get the analytical level to be able to compare. And compare what? Okay, and there you got me. I didn't now look it up again, but it was like on a stringency. We called it stringency, and then other kind of categories. But the point was you had to go to the regulation and then be even more specific. So you had to, we say environmental policy, and then but what exactly? Yeah, and then you go and then you choose some very specific sub-policies, and then you go in these specific sub-policies to further kind of, okay, how were the technical standards things kind of managed? So I remember, but I've not been taking a deep part in that discussion, but I remember that there were coders, like groups like us from these countries because we had 18 countries or something, so they had to meet, and there was no Zoom yet, so in that time so common. They had to meet and be very clear that they speak about the same things to be able then to see in the national legislation what is the correspondence to X, Y, and Z. So this was one of the major kind of challenges that I was not. I mean, I was more on the theoretical side. I was happy not to be part of that kind of discussion, but it was a tremendous effort to preserve comparability among these items.
Maybe you can explore a little bit more about which are the main lessons you had about the politics of policy dismantling. I mean, of course, when we talk about new public management, this is one of the explanations. But what else can explain policy dismantling? How do you deal with that after learning about so many cases?
Okay, this is also, I started this project, and I really started it because I first, maybe some of you know my work on termination. So I started it a bit with a head, which is not my style. Usually I have to see things and have a case study. But I actually was working, I did my, okay, now I'm a bit telling you a bit biographical. I have a biographical prelude to this question. But I think maybe something can be learned from that. So I did my PhD, and then I went to postdocs, but then I thought, where's the real life? And I went to government. Yeah, the biggest mistake in my life. Yeah.
Wow.
Because in government, there is no real life in government. That is
Why?
Yeah, because it's like it was not the federal government, it was the regional government, so it was a bit parochial. But anyway, it was a very nice job, and I had a lot of positive kind of thing. But I was at the, let's say, I went back to academia, which is not so easy, but I had a kind of, well, that's now biographical. I had a bit, I think it was in a very good position going back, even though I don't recommend you if you want to do academics to go to government and come back. But I did it. You did it. Yeah, it depends also on the system. Might be a thing. I had a big advantage, and that was I knew that the real life was not better than academia, right? So many PhDs do their PhD, and then they say, I want to work really. I want to work for something real. And I had the same. And then I went for something real. And I thought, this is awful. Let's go back to academia. Yeah. So, but then there I was back, and I was a bit out of academia for 2 years, but published a bit. But I came with two projects. One was regional, and it's maybe not of your interest, was regional bureaucrats. And the other was, and that was a choice because it was about termination. And I found this termination by reading old literature on policy cycle. And everything was already done. Yeah, except termination. So So then I had okay termination, okay, but because my doctor mother, I had a doctor mother, and she was Adrienne Heritier. I don't know whether she know her, and she did nice things also about the cycle. And then I went to this obscure policy discussion from the 70s about termination, yeah, and sunset legislation, and that was somehow was nice, but that was a dead end, right? Because you don't have termination, basically. And here comes a bit the discussions we had, very fruitful discussions in Constance. We said, yeah, but we can look at termination, not, but a lower form of termination, like dismantling. So that is how I came to the dismantling thing, and that is maybe also the explanation for what I say now to answer your question. So I didn't know what to expect. Yeah, of course I supposed, because if you go back to policy analysis, so they would say, yeah, policy and things determine politics. I mean, you have to explain me that better. So there are some holy grails of the policy analysis that are probably just not true. These were just nice ideas 50, 60, 70 years ago, and there is no special politics of determination or of the dismantling. So that's my answer to your question is, and to my own regret. And if I oversold it, so you will quote me, and I maybe have different quotes about this, but I'd say there is no, the politics is the politics. It's just that, so I wouldn't, also here, I would not go to a new kind of things. Of course, things are different. Why they are different most of the time? Because the fallback option, and this is Fritz Scharpf. Do you know Fritz Scharpf? It's a German policy scientist that was very influential in Germany, and his thinking very often is bounces back to what is, if we don't agree, what is the fallback option? If there's no, we negotiate about something. So if we don't agree, what happens then? And I think that is different in the policy dismantling perspective, probably, than in a policy change kind of thing. Yeah. So, do you have a bit, let's say, other means with what you can do? So you need a bit of different kind of, if you have a. Yeah, it's of course nicer to promise something to people to kind of make them follow your change than to take things away. So there is a difference, obviously, but this is not a categorical difference, because they still will be unhappy and mobilize against you, which they would do in favor of a policy solution if they wanted it. So I see, of course, a mirror image of many things, but not a completely different politics. Yeah, okay. And now I tell you something else that you may not know, but you should look to it. There is my friend and colleague Christoph Knill, with whom I did these studies, has now a fantastic project about policy accumulation. Okay? So he was clever enough to all this dismantling to then come to the conclusion, but the real problem is actually policy accumulation. And now we don't speak about context like Bolsonaro and something. I think that is still something else. But in a policy, in a pure policy perspective, right? Cut away all this kind of backsliding now for a moment. If you purely are interested in theories in policy making, there is just very little dismantling, and this is the other thing, you have this Thielen, the Catherine Thielen, and this hacker people, and so they show you very clearly, I think, how things can be dismantled, even by either not changing anything, because then your budget goes always down. That you see in universities, actually, as an experience. It's all the same like last year. It's just inflation was there. I mean, you have this problem probably as well. So there's a lot of ways to dismantle that actually don't need, this kind of silent, this kind of indirect ways. that are super interesting, right? That you will never get with or very difficultly. No, you get it, of course, but you don't see it very well in the data. You have to have your benchmarks in place, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about blame avoidance.
Exactly. It's much easier. So that is the way to go. You could even imagine, I think Hacker, this is the article. I love him for this. I don't know him personally, but you can even create a new institution that kind of gets into competition with your old kind of stuff, and to weaken therefore this other kind of policy field and policy stuff in order to kind of de facto get a kind of dismantling. So what Christoph is doing, and I love him for this, he's clever enough. He doesn't believe his own kind of theories, and he goes to a new one and says, okay, accumulation. And maybe you have a look on the accumulation things, because I find this it's rather than to really dismantle something formally, you leave the things in place. Okay, and I think that's the problem in dismantling studies, yeah, because you have so many contexts and so many benchmarking problems to really prove dismantling, while you don't see, because of other changes, it is a de facto dismantling, but already by nailing it down, it's so difficult, right? That you have a real conceptual challenge. And there's the question, since the politics is probably the same, the instruments you have to use is a bit differently. So I guess I don't get me wrong. I don't say that dismantling is not a nice topic to study. It's just analytically and empirically not different from what you do usually if you study policy change. I think this is my punchline also with that question.
This takes me to my last question. So as you know, some of the people here in Brazil have been using the concept of policy dismantling to study democratic backsliding and what happened in our former government. And you told me that you yourself never made this connection about democratic backsliding and policy dismantling. So maybe you can talk more about the legitimacy of policy dismantling, and when we cross the border to say that this is something not part of the normal politics or the democracy.
But now it's your fault, because now you will hear things again that I already said in the last meetings of the last day. So I cannot help you here. But if you raise the question, then I have to say the same, basically. Okay, the question was the backsliding thing. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more about this, or to thank you for that, to make this connection. It made me almost, I had tears in my eyes when I saw this. It's like, my God, yeah, that's true. There is a connection, and I didn't see this. And maybe I even used dismantling in one of the categorizations, but I didn't connect it to my own work. Can you imagine? I was so obsessed with this bureaucracy stuff, and so I didn't make the connection until I saw these papers and spoke with Ghana. So it's incredible. That's wonderful. It's true. I saw these papers coming from you guys. I mean, from Brazil, and I thought, yeah, they're right. This can be done, and it's nice to do it. So that was really emotional for me, because I thought, yeah, I should have thought about this, but I didn't. So it goes to you. That's the author, and the oeuvre is something different. So. With the policy change thing, so dismantling, I think this is a bit similar the problem than we have. We have here a strong normative trap, I'd say. That especially you here in Brazil, that you are justifiably, you can be angry about dismantling from Bolsonaro, of course, I understand, and it's true. And by many standards, you can also call it by its name, yeah, dismantling. But there is a normative trap, not everything that populists in government do is by the definition, if you don't like it, let's say unjustified. I mean, they have the majority. Yeah. So now you can say, yeah, but they did this and that. Okay, then prove it and say the processes were kind of turked and they did a lot of politicization and so on and so forth. Yes, yes, yes. But at a certain level, they have a majority, or if they have the majority, because I know very little about Brazil, so let's leave it very abstract. You have a government that is populist. I mean, what does it mean, populist, right? I mean, this is also a discussion. Love to talk about this. There are people who say we need more populism to save democracy. So obviously they have a different notion of how democracy should work. What should it be, right? But you can make this argument. It's clear that the populism has a majoritarian legitimacy chain. The majority should rule, and the rulers, the populism is precisely this. Trump feels empowered because he says, I'm elected, so I can decide everything. In majoritarian terms, he's right. What he's not right is but you are in a liberal democratic system. And the liberal, even though it means liberal, means actually your power is has the string, it's checks and balances. There's the constitution and so on and so forth. So I think this is populism. So I have reasons to don't like populism, of course, but also a populist in government can have a majority and can therefore be kind of entitled to change whatever he wants. But if he has the majority to change it. I don't speak about autocratization, I don't speak about dictatorships. But populism, and this is a definition, is a concept that needs elections still. Yeah. So if you are in rigged elections, then you're not anymore in the populist world. Also definitions, so don't blame me, it's in the literature, and we maybe want to challenge this. But you can speak from populists in government only if elections are still there, fair and fine. Otherwise, you are in a different category. And if we are in a category of autocrats, dictatorships, many of our policy kind of stuff that we are doing doesn't apply anymore, right? So you are here, have a lot of, let's say, elements that you need in your equations that are, have theoretical and strong theoretical implications. So where did we want to head? We want to say that the policy change done by populists can be justified and perfectly legitimate, right? So you have to give them this. I mean, if they have the majority, they can make gun laws, they can make environmental kind of stuff that you don't like, and so on and so forth. And that is a bit the normative trap. What they cannot do, and that's why backsliding and this debate is so interesting, and you are right to connect it with dismantling and backsliding, is, of course, if it starts to get into unfair means, or let's say what you can call undemocratic in the sense of, you politicize overly. And I admit I don't have definitions for all these categories, but I think my theoretical answer is here. Half of the policy change events might be justified. Other half maybe not, because they have been achieved by fair means, or by, let's say, circumventing even the parliaments completely, or of whatever. And I think one part of policy change under populists is democratic, or you can make arguments about that it's still democratic, and others not. And I think the backsliding debate has to focus clearly on this other side. Otherwise, it is falling into a normative trap. And some of the, but not published, more kind of conference papers that I saw and so, they're very, were too easy with this, you know, because you are a gender or environmentalist. It doesn't mean that, you know, the democracy cannot change and have other decisions. And we see this problem with a lot of these movements now that throw paint on the so you have also here, this is also if you wish, a kind of undemocratic kind of empowerment. This is also what the populists think. I don't know how many of you are part of this movement, so I have to be diplomatic, I guess, but you can make a similar argument. They feel empowered by objective in that case, and I have a lot of sympathy for them, but the mechanism is the same. That is not justifiable, and they still kind of want it. But that is our system, and then we have to change the system, and then you are in a more autocratic maybe system, because we as a democracy want to bring a majority behind the decisions, right? So I think I was not very clear, but I think you got my idea where this goes, in which direction this has to go in order to make a nice connection between backsliding and illiberal policy change.
Well, since you have talked a lot to Gabriela so far, now we will open for the audience to raise some questions and comments. Who would like to start? Eduardo, go ahead. And I think you have
Hello. Whipped institution. Thanks a lot. It was great to hear first ideas about this. I'm not disappointed at all, because I think I'm one of those who were kind of struggling to accept dismantling as it was being applied to Brazil, to recent processes. And I would like to maybe suggest that because I was struggling because there was something there. So Bolsonaro was dismantling things, you know, and he was destroying things. At the same time, he was constructing things by destroying them, because he was replacing with other kinds of policies or models. I don't know. And then in a moment, I got to the idea that it's different to understand this and accept it, understand and accept dismantling as a strategy or a bunch of actions, and understand dismantling as a trajectory of the policies, and almost as a phase. And I think a part of the Brazilian community received the idea of dismantling because they needed a concept to frame what Bolsonaro was doing, and at the same time, we had all, including me, the feeling that was the end of the world. So it was really termination, our complete termination. So it was a phase. It was considered a phase while it was a strategy or a bunch of actions that were. And when we got to this idea, we collectively, actually, at Saying, I did the book on urban policies in São Paulo, and Renata has been doing a lot of things on social assistance. We bunched together to write some things about this. And we got to this changing from a phase to a strategy, you can get to oscillating trajectories of policy production, in which governments get to power, start to do something. The other ones try to destroy, but actually there are seeds that are left somewhere. In the Brazilian case, they migrate to civil society, because we have this process of migration of activists and policymakers and academics from the state to civil society, back and forth. And then in the next government, they return to the government. And so the policies do like this.
You said it much better than me. Yeah, it's precisely this. You have dismantling as a strategy, or it might be an outcome. But it's not this kind of category of policy cycle in its own right, like policy agenda setting or decision making and so on and so forth. If we can agree on that, many of the puzzles vanish. Because of course you can do all kind of, of course you wanted to dismantle stuff, right? But this is not so much different from other actors in the past that want certain outcomes. So there is this fight of policy making that is also there. So you can use this stuff, and then of course the outcome might be dismantling. And I think this is very interesting. And the strategy is dismantling. Voila. But not a own kind of, let's say, policy field world in itself that would merit a different theoretization than the normal policy. That's why I say my policy change or policy transformation or whatever, because indeed, and then many things stay. So you have also this, that's why this policy accumulation is so, I think it's Christoph's answer to this question. Yeah, you can, of course, this might also, accumulation might be, you may create so many new policies that your capacity to actually do something vanishes because one arm of government, of administration doesn't know anymore what the other is doing. So that you may have, I speculate, at least you can imagine some outcome that is de facto dismantling because you get stuck with your stuff by doing too much. I'm pushing it, but I think there you go.
In the original concept, what I found very persuasive is that it was about the direction. So the idea that regular policy change don't mind about direction. And for some reasons, we need to take care about that, or we need to be interested in that. So it's not an outcome, it's a direction, then, and it's a subtype of policy change, so it's perfect. But then there's I would say, a slightly more difficult question to answer, which is how can we differentiate or draw the threshold between dismantling and regular negative change? I mean, governments change lots of things. So when can we start calling something dismantling or any kind of negative change, or it's dismantling? So is there any threshold we can draw there, or it's mainly a normative parameter, or it has to do, because there's some interesting debate here which says, well, actually, no, not everything that changes, even if it changed against my preferences, can be called dismantling.
That's precisely.
However, we need to draw some line between certain kinds of changes that actually need a new name because they're not kind of regular change. And your answer, it's interesting when linked with the backsliding, because it's formal. It's about procedures. It's not about direction. So what they're saying, well, actually, it's because they are authoritarians. But one of the answers that Brazilian literature is trying to explore is, well, when changes actually affect the main goals of the policy, in the idea that I'm not producing adjustments, I'm producing policy that actually goes against this definition by this definition itself of the policy, then you are dismantling. So it's a kind of a more aggressive way of changing things. This is one of the answers that they are trying to deal with this differentiation.
I'm completely agreeing with you. I have no problem with this. I mean, negative change or deregulation and so on and so forth. I wouldn't like to go into these definitional kind of things. At the end of the day, you make your analysis and you have to put your empirics right, and you have to define your concepts and so on and so forth. And if you call it in your last chapter or in your last section of the paper, my assessment is that this is dismantled because this is this and this. I think this is just fine. I mean, that is I wouldn't. Maybe you want to have a new, and that's what we did somehow. Yeah, we wanted, of course, to have a label. as a promotion to, also in academia. Academia works a lot with labels, and that's why it was for us a perfect thing to call it dismantling, right? And I encourage you to also look for a label if you want to go to combine, but still you combine this with a backsliding agenda that goes a bit into the, let's say, unfairness of policy making. It's still maybe more common than I think because I'm not in politics, but then create your label or redefine dismantling as you to your convenience, in the sense of, yeah, we know this dismantling, but for us it's dismantling X, Y, Z, and then you can work with it. But you still define your empirical puzzles, and you're seeing normally you show that there have been, as you say, I mean, there is different governments, but there is also governments that, and that was also our conceptual problem. You could increase something in one policy and decrease in the other one. Does this then kind of ease if mathematically you have no change, right? Yeah, so okay, then you need to go to the subcategory, but that is at the technical policy measurement level is very tricky, and you can also have this elephant. I mean, this kind of do you say this Potemkin? You can create something that looks like a accumulation or something. And 3-4 things you let go down. It's for the analyst then to kind of, that's why we need you. I made this joke already yesterday, but I think it applies here as well, and more to you because you're a bigger group. But you should be very grateful to Bolsonaro.
In what sense?
Because you can do this research now. Yeah, because you can. We still have wonderful things to research. You have all this data. I'm working on backsliding bureaucracy. I mean, in Germany,
It's boring.
Last week, but then I didn't go. But we did some interviews in a very small town in the province in eastern Germany, because there is a mayor that is from the right wing things. And I first wanted to go, but then I was so happy. I said, no, I go to Brazil, and it gets too busy, because then I would have to go to speak. There is no data because we don't have so much of it. And you have wonderful data. I mean, that's one. You come to all these journals. I mean, you can build your careers on dismantling and all things. This is fantastic. That's why I'm here. I envy you so much. I mean, I also want to have such an experience. Maybe I wouldn't push it that.
Anybody else? I have one. Go ahead, Rogério. No, please go ahead. No, go ahead.
My name is Rogério Schlegel. I'm from the Federal University of São Paulo. Allow me to think aloud a little bit. I was thinking about conversion. When we think about policy change by conversion, there's a lot of intersubjective matter involved. Would you agree with me? Because we are dealing with the interpretation of the rules, of the institutions, of the policy itself. And I would like to provoke you, Professor Bauer, and my colleagues here, to try. Isn't there something similar when we think about dismantling? Because Eduardo mentioned the strategy factor involved, but can't we think about even an intersubjective that involves the player at the government, but also the citizen, the regular citizen, in spotting, in identifying the dismantling? You see, as we can discuss when there is a conversion, because we're dealing with interpretation. Why can't we discuss if we're in front of dismantling? Because the actor that is in government is trying to dismantle, and I, as a citizen, understand it as dismantling. You see, I'm dealing with, I don't know, concepts, values, and intersubjectivity.
Yeah,
Thanks.
my if I can also add a biographical aspect to the answer to this question. My son is now the first month in university, right?
Oh, nice.
And he studies physics. And when I see what he's doing, I think, yeah, okay, what we are doing is very subjective. I mean, just for sure, it is very subjective and interpretative, and that's all true. And your term conversion is one of Hacker's terms as well, if I remember correctly.
Exactly.
This, so this is precisely this, and I have examples from Germany as well. You can call it transformation, right? So we had one. If I'm interested in German kind of administrative change, but after the Second World War, we had a lot of displaced people, right? And then they created a kind of agency. It was located in one agency, but it was one agency with some branches that would kind of make sure that these people are kind of integrated. There was a redistribution exercise. So there was an agency for the purpose of integrating these people. And you would imagine that if this task is over, no, but it still exists today. That's the punchline here. And you have many examples of this. There's even here, even if objectively the task is done, an organization finds new things to do and so on and reinvents itself. The function has been terminated, but the organization not. So also here, conversion is a conversion thing. And that's why I think we have a consensus. We have a consensus. There's a dismantling strategy, and there might be a termination or dismantling outcome. But in between, we deal with policy change and transformation in ways that are very similar. Or let's say there will be areas where you guess you can find out nice things like Hacker or these people did, or like we did with a more quantitative kind of approach. But this will always remain open to interpretations as well. I mean, in some, I think okay, let you push me. So I'm also kind of brainstorming a bit. I guess the punchline is here that the challenge is not so much theoretical. And that's maybe the puzzle we are after. So we think, theories and concept. Maybe the challenge is more empirical. So maybe in kind of being very disciplined in your empirical kind of work is more worthwhile for the sake of this discussion than be too worried about, is this negative change, is this zero, whatever, or dismantling, because that, in the end of the day, the direction is clear what you want to say. But empirically to kind of nail it down, that's maybe the greatest challenge.
May I jump on this? Because I was wondering regarding what Rogério has said, that sometimes these normative traps that you have mentioned can be dealt with regarding the research design. Because I think it's important to deal with long time periods and to compare different types of governments, because then we are not only relying on our own judgment of this specific type of government. This goes back to the multi-level question I raised before, and you skip it a little bit, because I think this is also interesting, because we had Bolsonaro at the federal level, but at subnational level, we still had other types of policies, especially due to the policy accumulation and historical process of state capacity building at the subnational level. So I think it's interesting to think about in new ways of designing research to deal with this. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, I heard yesterday something similar. Maybe it's the same project that you can have, on the federal level, a dismantling, let's call it dismantling, but now we know that it's problematic to think about these decisions. And at the lower level, you have maybe governments of different colors that uses, as we would always suspect and expect as policy scientists, that they implement this differently. And my suggestion was to kind of develop the design in a way that you really have two that you control for the colors, maybe more than you think. Select the outcomes a bit. You should not select on outcomes. I know I forgot all about this methodological thing, but in that case, you can indeed, if you know, you should select on the same color of regional or local level administration or political systems, whatever, political entities, they should have the same color, that is a different color than Bolsonaro, but the outcomes should be different from that. And that I find a very reasonable research design, others as well. But yeah, the problem is the accumulation always, or the kind of we are limited analysts. You can only look to what you can look to. We have in Germany discussions, for example, about child poverty. And we have a lot of policies against child poverty, and now we have another one that tries to combine this. Yeah, even these experts that are in one area, and so they are not sure how this works together. Yeah, so is now this new policy that combines this and has actually but it's a different story. Needs a new administration then. So is this I still think the interpretation then, since we don't get out of this, we have to, in order to do research, we have to limit our perspective, our window where we look to. And of course, if then something happens here and there, if you don't know, it's very difficult. So I find it nice to go to a long-term kind of thing. But still, it's very challenging, as all policy change, I guess. So it's also something that we should remember or not forget, that also policy change is challenging. To nail down policy change and it's always difficult. Okay, what do I want to say here? I want to say then you have a new government and says we do a new child policy and everything will be good. And I think you can also make you can look to this very carefully, and this is a lot of marketing and stuff, and at the end there's not so much that changes, right? Also, if this would be a positive change, yeah, that we expect. You see what I mean? I mean, this is also to establish empirically and clearly that these things have changed in a better or whatever way is as challenged, maybe a bit less challenged, but the focus is clearer because somebody says, I have done something, right? So there's a bit more, but it's as challenging than the other side of the story. Yeah, so we deceive ourselves a bit, if I can be provocative, that to analyze positive policy change, whatever that is, would be easier. It's not true. I mean, probably it's not true.
Anybody else? May I ask you another? While they are warming up, I have to take advantage of my position here. The policy accumulation debate is quite interesting, especially in the Brazilian case. And I love the Tulum paper on policy integration, actually, because this is a big deal for the Brazilian case. We are still trying to build something called welfare state system and things like that. But why are you studying policy accumulation now, and how do you think we can learn from the type of research you are doing?
No, I'm not part of this project. I just find it for the discussion about policy dismantling, where we had a lot of those problems. I find it then funny, and also it struck me as a good point, a counterpoint, if you wish, to turn the things around and to look at accumulation. Maybe that is not your problem. Maybe this is saturated welfare states. And the angle is a bit different because you look to state capacity. Now, can the state actually still do what he's promising to do? Does the state know what he's doing because of the many policies that are in place and that get forgotten because of this political economy of you need attention, you need new projects, you need to sell new things, you need to inspire, you need to have an agenda, and so that is a bit. So it's for me that is not, it may not be that helpful for the dismantling discussion. I just thought it's good to look at it in these terms to become a bit more modest about what is reachable in the dismantling camp, right? I don't know whether this makes sense, but for me it made a bit sense because we were looking so hard for dismantling, and we found so little, if you wish, that I found this to turn things around and to ask about state capacity in a saturated field. I found very clever. Yeah. Of course, this doesn't help you if you're on dismantling stuff, but I found this for me very striking because maybe we should have come to Brazil anyway already, yeah? Or to other places than maybe the countries that because we also did what we did, and with some countries and some policy areas, But does this mean that we know it? No, we have data about some countries and some policies. Yeah? So other countries, other policies,
Adrian, go ahead.
There's I would say, a quite interesting discussion on retrenchment, which remembers me your position now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And obviously, Paul Pearson is the big name on that, and then the idea of new welfare politics. And it seems that along the years, there was more change that actually Paul Pearson was able to find, because there's a lot of things changing, and they change in the long run. So if you take a look in a short run, maybe you don't get the whole picture, but in the long run, it seems that actually neoliberal reforms actually change a lot, much more than the original diagnosis by Paul Pearson. How would, and there's a lot of discussion that why is that? So would you say that it could be that in the long term, the kind of changes you look at maybe would show us actual changes, but you don't have the time frame enough to look at that?
Yeah. No, you make me think, because indeed the Pearson stuff is always, I mean, of course we try to do it differently, right? Because we could not do the same in Pearson. And we thought, okay, this is too much social, but it's extreme good, yeah, and extreme probably he really got onto mechanisms that we probably didn't, but maybe I'm too modest, but I could not, I mean, we try to be empirically comparative. That's maybe and we did want to go away from this redistribution welfare state kind of stuff, right? But indeed, this is a very so we try to look for other sectors and for concepts that would lend themselves more easier to quantitative comparisons across countries, maybe more in the short term. But you're right to say, okay, what is with the new public management stuff? What is all the liberal agendas, the neoliberal agendas, and so on and so forth? So many people would agree with that in the end, that is a much bigger kind of thing, and it is in front of our eyes. So why don't we look there to see that the social state has lost capacities? But I guess this is on another level of this dismantling project was a project more technical in the sense of policy comparison. We wanted to have the data. We wanted to do it in a way to publish in the big journals. And then you needed this data. But yeah, maybe I completely agree that the real stuff may be in front of our eyes, but more difficult to measure over time. Absolutely. Also, there is one There's one book that I'm not sure whether she, a Swiss a colleague, I can look it up then, that also Celia Häusermann, I think, Celia Häusermann. Just maybe you look at that stuff that is that I thought at the time when we did the dismantling, I thought, yeah, that's because she goes further. She's more in this debate of the Pearson kind of stuff, and has a very nice contributions there. So Celia Häusermann, but I fear that she did her PhD or whatever habilitation in that area. I'm not sure whether she's still working there, but she has maybe some answers to you or some kind of contributions to this debate. Answers probably. Answers are rare, very rare, very rare. Yeah.
Anybody else? No? Jana, from the audience? No?
You know, I also was thinking, I mean, they said, yeah, we go and then we will discuss and have a dialogue and then we go for a beer. And I thought, a beer or a drink at 3 o'clock? You know, except what do you want to talk 3-4 hours about this? And I was a bit puzzled, to be honest, because it's not that I don't drink alcohol, but I drink alcohol like at lunch, and it's a lot. There was a gap in my agenda. I thought, okay, afterwards we go for a drink. Okay.
Well, I can ask you about your experience on the government, if you want to say more about this, and why do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can, yeah, sure.
Because So if you wanna,
dismantle government. Afterwards,
did
I was
like, did you succeed?
No, I'm actually. It might now. You know, if we speak about these things, you may think I'm an extroverted person, but it's not true. I'm actually an introverted person. And in government, I mean, this was not government. I was in the administration, right? I was an expert on European affairs. And I was in this very nice position. I could, you know, if it were only on the intellectual, on the substance, it was completely fine. But then I would not be here yet. So it's like also, but then there was a lot of things like organizing congresses and, you know, doing policy contributions for the minister, and I thought I'm rather doing, if I do a paper, I want also to be the author of this paper, right, and not write the whole time anonymously for this machinery and work for people that are mediocre, you know? Because it was a regional government. I guess if I had a better context, I would probably have gone for it, because it was a very nice thing in terms of in principle, I like government and the idea of, you know, the activist bureaucrat, right? So if I would have been in a different context, maybe I would have gone on. But since I was in a context where you didn't have power, to explain again, I was working in a European affairs unit, and I was actually doing more like lawyer's job. I would comment on basic kind of issues of European integration. However, the regional government has no competence whatsoever in this area, and so you feel a bit
useless,
yeah. Yes. And then if you work for very kind of thing, and if you see that the half of the unit were like, okay, it's 4 o'clock, let's go, and have a beer, or maybe golf or whatever. I thought, I'm too young. I cannot already go to pension with 30, right? It was too young. And then I went out and had a lot of stress, but it was also more fun. I mean, the ex-post, I had the experience and I'm as you now know, maybe better, since we know better, you know better from what I'm saying, but I'm also not a person that could not work in, let's say, environmental. I would be too nervous. This nitty-gritty kind of stuff that you have to be able to do as a real technocrat. You have to be on 100%, 120% in your dossier. I cannot do this. I understood. I cannot. It's like, okay, give me the message, give me the punchline. How do we explain some things? But to go to the nitty gritty, and so I could not. And so I would never be a good bureaucrat. I think.
This is why Gabriela has another question.
Yeah.
It's not because of that, but I have a question. If you were lucky to be Brazilian,
Yeah.
a Brazilian scholar,
Legal.
and experience Bolsonaro's government and later the elections and the new government. So we experienced many changes, policy dismantling, replacement, new things going on, bureaucrats resisting and now working in the government. Which would be your new research questions in this new moment that we are experiencing?
Yeah. So if I were lucky enough to be Brazilian. First, there is a Denmark problem. I repeat myself, I'm sorry. Mariana also heard this already. There's a Denmark problem. Yeah, the Denmark problem is that, if now so many people work about issues and data of Brazil, where the hell do you publish this, Even if JPART is now taken over by you, I'm sure that, Gabi cannot push for more Brazilian papers in JPART than they're already there. So there is a Denmark problem that you should think about. And that would also kind of imply that you frame your research. And now I sound like these old guys, no? So I'm not yet emeritating, no? I'm still kind of active social scientist, okay? But if I had to say something to a young researcher about research, I would say, in this context now, frame the things so that they stay a bit longer are up to date, right? If you go too much to this issue of Bolsonaro and so, then you have to pray that he's re-elected. Otherwise, if you have then finished your research in 3-4 years, maybe the interest has gone somewhere else. So that would be my general remark. So be a bit careful and think about what would be next. But still answering the question, I think, and we spoke about this as well, I think that what we don't know much about is bouncing back. It's still the same question of policy change, up and down, but you could phrase it under this label, in the sense of okay, now we had a lot of dismantling, and now we have the good guys back. So what do they do? Is this really bouncing back? Of course, it will not bounce back. It will be a transformation, and so on and so forth. But I think this is a bit the expectation that people have. Oh yeah, Lula is there. But this is not solving the problem already, right? And if I were a Brazilian young researcher, I would be a Brazilian young researcher, that is what we want to be, but and have a bit of time. Yeah, I mean, I do my projects. The PhD is about to be published, a lot of paper in JPART or somewhere else, or in American journals. So I would take a bit of time to look at that, but under the perspective of this, what we now kind of, our conversation was about this unfairness kind of things, right? You cannot do the whole policy change stuff, and we don't expect that things bounce back. But can we see in some, let's say, can we categorize or can we define a bit what are good democratic standards, or how the democratic standards of doing things were before, and are they healed now? You see where I'm heading? It's not per se the policy change. It's rather, are there scars and traces that will remain from that backsliding kind of experience that are impinging on the quality of democracy? I think that is the question to ask, because the policy change can be healed. Tomorrow, new government, they make new decisions, wonderful. But do we have middle to long term, let's say, institutional, formal, informal changes that have brought us to a lower level, or are promised to bring us to a lower level of democracy? The long term, okay, I'm thinking aloud, but it would be the long term illiberal impact of the Bolsonaro agenda. But I want to co-author this paper.
She's already writing. She's already making the paper. Go ahead. Yeah, for sure. Adriana, você tem, por favor, o microfone?
So it's just a point related to this one that remembers me another point that Gabi was talking some months ago about the learning process within organizations. And for instance, considering all this terrible experience that bureaucrats have lived throughout Bolsonaro government, Gabi was thinking about possible learning, organizational learning process from all of this. And my question would be, how do you see possible research agendas related to policy dismantling and some kind of learning process? Yes, it's this.
Policy dismantling learning processes. I'm not an expert in policy learning. I had always, admittedly, I had a problem with this notion of learning. How does this go into an institution? And but yeah, so I had always a bit of problems with this. But nevertheless, of course, this is a big debate, and learning is there. So I guess you can just kind of take that stuff. So, but I'm not. But I would still come back to this, the relevance. As long as the question you ask is relevant, use whatever kind of stuff you have in policy analysis to conceptualize it. Yeah, I mean, if you have a relevant question like this, what is the long-term damage that Bolsonaro did to our democracy? Is this learning or not learning? So there I'm a bit. You find me. I have not a lot what I could tell you here. But if you tell me what your research questions, I mean, the puzzles is where is the policy? Then maybe something I could add. But it's like this. I think there's millions or a lot of things that you can raise, but you have to give me a bit more context to say something intelligent about it.
I think people is a little bit shy. We can have coffee before we have beer over there, and
I don't
maybe
want to
during
interfere in Brazilian culture.
No, we don't have beer at 3 in the afternoon usually. So maybe we can have December. It's summertime. Oh yeah. So, but maybe. Do you have a question, Antonio? It's Friday, yeah. But maybe during coffee, people are less shy, and then they can. Oh, no, I am a professor, so anytime anybody raise a hand, or I think people wanna ask questions. But thank you very much, Michael. It was really inspiring. Yeah. And in name of the Center for Metropolitan Study, I would like to invite you to come back and discuss more with us.
If I had known that there are so many people, I would have prepared. I thought there's just 3-4 people.
No, but it worked. It was.
But you should have told me that there are more people, because I have a present for you as well. Yeah? And I thought this is like in Brasilia. This is you said, it's Christmas and we go to the beach and we have our beer at 3:00. In Germany now it's also Christmas, but the context is very, very different, as you know. So this is a bit the context. So there's snow and we have these Christmas markets. It's very cold. So my family envies me as I send these pictures where I'm in the sun and they're like, oh my God.
Have you been to the mall here?
I wanted to give you a bit of flavor of Christmas. And maybe you know all this, or you have it here as well, like the Oktoberfest is for sure also in Brazil, right? But this is a special, like cookies. Nice. That we eat around that time of the year. So this is one sort. There are hundreds of sorts, and many of all decent German mothers grandmothers
Okay.
make their own cookies now, and then you stuff their nipoti and their grandchildren with these kind of things, and we all grow big and more. And I brought you some. The problem is they are very big.
We do the
But
we
we have
do
to
the
cut them.
Brazilian way.
Because
We
I didn't
share.
know that there
We
so many
share.
of you. So this
We
is
are used to
Lebkuchen.
scarcity, so
This
we
is-
can, we can
So
we
I-
just cut and share.
There's some cookies from Germany, Christmas cookies for you.
Oh, so nice! Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can have cookies and coffee before beer, and we thank you. It's really kind. Thank you.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
You love it. But have you gone to the shopping malls here? You know, have you seen the Santa Claus?